Scientist has been doing his own testing offline, discovering COVID strains appear quite similar to flu strains. One America's Caitlin Sinclair reports from New York.
So, Mr. J, I know you can't reveal much of your identity or exactly what hospital you work at, but what can you tell our viewers about yourself before we get into the work and all the fantastic research that you've been doing?
So I am a medical laboratory scientist. I was in the Navy for 10 years. I worked as a lab scientist there as well. But in my civilian life now, I am a lab scientist as well. And so we work with the Abbott ID Now, and we work with, a multitude of different laboratory analyzers and, in my profession.
Okay, so that's the particular instrument that you all use. Now, you felt like the global drop in the flu was, for lack of a better word, odd. At this point in the year, we typically have a pretty large number of flu cases, and right now we're pretty much at zero. So take us from there. Once you started noticing these stats, you started investigating the numbers.
So what I kind of honed in on was the fact that we had a meeting in our laboratory, and they were reporting the numbers. And now this was a little less than a month ago, I believe. But at that point, we had absolutely zero flu cases. Now, since then, since we talked last, I think we may be up to 3 positive flu cases, which is still insanely low. People are coming into the ER, and the ER nurses and staff are told, if you have flu-like symptoms, or you don't even do the flu test, go straight to COVID, test for COVID first, because we want to make sure the patients don't have COVID. And then whether the patient's COVID positive or negative, we're not seeing very, very many flu test orders come in after that. And especially if someone's COVID positive, the doctor won't even order a flu.
Sure.
And on numerous occasions, I've taken patient swabs and carefully transferred the swab from the patient swab to a clean swab and tested it for flu just for my own, knowledge. And those swabs are coming back positive for flu. So a patient that was testing positive for COVID also had the flu, but was technically never ordered or ran by the doctor. But I know the patient has flu and I can't say anything.
So could it be that someone has the flu and COVID?
It's very possible for people to have COVID and flu. What I find interesting about the COVID testing that we do, especially on the Abbott ID Now, for cross-reactivity. So that basically means if I'm testing for COVID-19, what's the probability of another strain of COVID popping positive in place of COVID-19? And the analyzer that we're using, I believe, only basically rules out 2 other strains of COVID. Mm-hmm. There are many strains of COVID, and it's published that many strains of COVID are no more serious than the common cold. And what I think, in my professional opinion, is that people are coming in, they're being tested for COVID. The COVID positive comes forward, and it could be one of those weak strains of a cold that's popping positive for COVID, but being, the data is showing that it's a COVID-19 case.
So that would almost explain why some people come in with COVID-like symptoms and they feel fine, a little stuffy nose or fatigue here and there, but they don't necessarily have the more severe strain of COVID. Of course, others develop the very serious strain, which is where the concern should be.
I'm not debating whether or not COVID-19 is real. I believe the virus is real. And it's a very aggressive virus that attacks the respiratory system. I'm just arguing that the numbers of COVID-19 are way out of control, and the CDC has no control over those numbers.
Right now, there's so many questions I have, and I think there's a certain narrative that has been floated out there in the past that this COVID-19 virus really is just the flu. Can you explain exactly what else you discovered on your own, since you actually had your hands on these positive COVID swabs?
It certainly, in my opinion, falls in line with the flu. I believe that it is a separate virus with flu-like symptoms. For me, what I found interesting during some of the investigative testing that I was doing, I took a COVID-19 positive control swabs. Well, I used a COVID positive swab on my flu analyzer, and it came back positive for both flu A strain and flu B strain, which was odd. If the buffer, generally buffers or, salines and things like that, they really shouldn't have viruses in them. And if there's some sort of proprietary viral matrix that they use, Why flu? It's not necessarily stated in any of the packet material that comes with the analyzer, and generally, every bit of information is well known and made public. What's in these different parts of the tests? So I was unable to find the reason why I'm able to reproduce a flu result on COVID buffer solution.
Such an interesting conversation. Thank you for having it with me. And if you come across anything else strange, please let us know.
Want to see more videos like this? Visit OANN.com for immediate access to all the clips you've been waiting to see.